Hello and welcome to 3 Inning Fan, the podcast with me, Kelley Franco. It is September 10th. We have gotten into some cooler temps up here in the Northeast, although I hear summer is going to have a last gasp this weekend, and temperatures could climb into the 80s. But when we look at the baseball schedule, it looks like the number of games left are in the teens. The Yankees and the Mets each have 18 games left as of today, Tuesday. Today, we're talking about where the Mets have been and what they still need to do to cement their postseason spot over their nail-biting September schedule. We'll discuss the Yankees and what Aaron Judge needs to do to cement his status as a Yankee legend. We'll also talk some Jasson Dominguez and other roster moves. And we'll hop around to MLB with a focus on West Coast teams today. I keep you fluent in all things baseball because 3 Inning Fan listeners can always hold up their end of the cocktail party baseball conversation, no matter the team. Not to mention, eat copious amounts of shrimp, never forget a name, have great-looking hair, and only spill translucent drinks. Here at 3 Inning Fan, we care for the whole person. Let's talk some Mets. The Mets are ahead of the Braves and in the third spot for the wild card, and they're eyeing the 1 and 2 spots too. We just never would have thought this in May. The Mets have an air of excitement and promise about them right now. There are so many positives. The starting rotation right now seems to have 3 aces, honestly, Severino, Manaea, and Peterson. The bullpen is pitching well, the defense is making great plays, and the bats are heating up too, but not all of them. We'll get to that. The Mets have 18 games left, and 10 of those are against the Phillies and the Braves combined. That's 7 games against the Phillies and 3 against the Braves. That is the second-to-last series of the season, and that is going to be a good one. It's at Truist Park. If the Mets take that series, they will own the tiebreaker between the two teams. So for my more casual fans, let me take a second to explain. MLB no longer plays those tiebreaker games to see who gets a postseason berth. Think about the iconic Yankees-Red Sox playoff game of 1978, although it was technically a regular season game. Instead, what they do now is they go to see who won the most of the regular season matchups between the two teams. So bringing this back to the Mets and the Braves, they each have won 5 of the 10 games they have played so far this year. So if the Mets can win 2 of the 3 against the Braves during that last week of September, then what they will do is they will own the tiebreaker. And should the Mets and the Braves end in a tie at the end of this season, the Mets would prevail and get the berth. And right now, a tie is totally a possibility because these teams are all neck and neck. Note that the Mets are still in the race for the 1 and 2 wild card spots. These slots are currently held by the Padres and the Diamondbacks, and the Mets just happen to own the season tiebreakers already over the Padres and the Diamondbacks. The Mets had a great 9-game winning streak, which was exactly what they needed to surge ahead into wild card contention, and they got it done. Now, the streak ended on Sunday, as all winning streaks have to do at some point, but last night they beat the Blue Jays, and McGill was brilliant. He stepped in after Blackburn was scratched at the last minute. It was kind of a weird game because the Mets only had 3 hits in the game, but there was a wild pitch passed ball extravaganza that happened in the 8th inning to the detriment of the Blue Jays, and the Mets were able to capitalize and bring home the win. Let's look at where the Mets have been and what they still need to do. The moment when they were so far down that they couldn't get up was June 2nd. They were 11 games under 500. Some of my followers even stopped watching. You won't admit it now, but you know who you are. But then they went to London, and all of a sudden, Lady Luck was waiting outside their door, and they were winning. They won that second game against the Phillies in London. Now, it was only a 2-game series, but they split it. And it was so exciting because it looked like the Phillies were going to pull out the second game, but then the Mets won it on an amazing double play, home play to first double play in the bottom of the ninth of the second game. And I truly believe that was the moment when they turned their season around. And maybe I also kind of want to believe it because I was there at the game in London and I got to meet all my fantastic London friends. The offense after that started leading the way. Lindor got hot, and soon the pitching staff followed. And we have really also seen the defense move in a positive direction, too, whether it was Tyrone Taylor's Spider-Man catch. Did you see that against the Cubs? The ton of double plays they've turned, or Luis Torrens gunning down runners on second base. That would be base stealers. So what do they need to do to bring this season to a finish line that involves a postseason berth? Nimmo and Alonso need to heat up, okay? They're both slumping. Fans are particularly fed up with Alonso and his lack of production with runners in scoring position. If these two guys produce and Lindor stays hot, and MVP hot is really what I'd like, this team's offense is going to look good. And I might add that if Alonso gets hot, it would help his offseason chances of signing a respectable and possibly long-term contract, hopefully with the Mets. I honestly cannot picture him in another uniform. Lastly, the Mets suffered a blow in losing McNeil for at least the rest of the season with a broken wrist. That was too bad. It hasn't been McNeil's best season, but it's still a loss. Iglesias has been great so far, and he'll step up nicely. He started a beautiful double play over the weekend against the Reds. I hope you saw that one. And were you watching the Terry Collins show a day or so ago when he had Noah Syndergaard on as a guest? He said he would love to come back to New York. Now, he's not pitching right now in MLB, so I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but it's always nice to hear. And I will say that the Noah Syndergaard Garden Gnome was one of the best giveaways in the history of baseball. It could be that is his legacy. Are you listening or watching right now and you have not yet jettisoned yourself out the window? Well, that's a great sign, and maybe it's also a sign that you should hit the subscribe button on YouTube or the follow button on Apple or Spotify. And no matter what, please follow me on the socials at 3inningfan. The Yankees. Guess who's here? The Martian, Jasson Dominguez. Just when you had started to think he was on that spaceship that those guys are on, that they don't know how to bring him home. No, he's not. He's here. He's landed. The Yankees called him up Monday ahead of the game with the Royals. Last night he had a hit and he scored a run. GM Brian Cashman had said that Dominguez wouldn't be called up unless there could be regular playing time for him. So I think there's going to be regular playing time. And Aaron Boone said there was going to be regular playing time. So the Martian's here and hopefully here to stay. The Yankees also placed DJ LeMahieu on the 10-day IL with a hip impingement. Apparently, DJ actually came to the club and said it was time for an IL stint, and that's what opened the door to the Martians landing. We can expect Verdugo to have less playing time in favor of Dominguez, although maybe Verdugo sensed this when he hit a 2-run home run last night. But last night, Stanton actually sat and Judge DH'd, and the Martian played center field. And John Birdie was activated from the IL yesterday, although he didn't play last night. And Birdie will be nice to have back. He's got some versatility in the field, and he's a good righty off the bench, so it'll be good to have him. And in terms of a corresponding move, Duke Ellis, whose name you probably didn't even have time to learn, he was claimed off waivers by the Yankees on August 26th. Well, don't feel like you need to learn his name now because he was optioned to Scranton. Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge has cooled off. He's still great, but he hasn't hit a homer in 13 games. Call the home run police. Although he did have 2 hits last night, Judge was just 8 for 43 going into last night's game. So that was 8 for 43 in the last 12 games going into last night's game. So he has to heat up, but he has to do more than heat up. If he wants to be a legend in New York, Aaron Judge needs to put this team on his back and lead them to a World Series win. Nothing short of that. I don't want to take anything away from Judge. I love Judge. But this is the Yankees. If you want to be mentioned in the same sentence as Ruth, Gehrig, Mantle, DiMaggio, Jeter, you got to bring home a ring. Period. The Yankee pitching. In Saturday's game, Clark Schmidt and Nestor Cortes shut out the Cubs, with Nestor coming out of the pen. Is this a harbinger of future Yankee plans? The Yankees, with Schmidt and Heel back, have 6 starters. They're probably using a 6-man rotation this week, but if no one gets hurt, someone's going to have to go to the pen. Nestor voiced his displeasure about the choice for his coming in from the pen last Saturday. Now, no starter is ever happy about going to the bullpen. That's been the way since the beginning of time. But Nestor did it, and he did it well. He did complain, which I'm not a big fan of. But since he performed well, I'm more likely just to give him a bye on his complaints. I heard Nestor was slated to start against the Red Sox this week, but so far it still looks like officially the pitching rotation is still TBD for the weekend. So the upshot is that some Yankee starter is moving to the pen, and we're just not sure who it is. Clay Holmes pitched great in the 8th inning on Sunday, needing only 12 pitches to retire the side. It's possible that he just pitches better when he's not in the closer role or maybe in lower leverage situations, although that theory has flaws too, since he has been an effective closer in the past. Go figure. But for right now, Aaron Boone will probably just use Holmes in spots where Boone thinks he can excel and try to build back his confidence. John Sterling is returning to the Yankees, allegedly. As you know, he retired in April of this year, and the reports are that he is coming out of retirement to call the Yankees postseason on WFAN. He's going to do rehab starts by calling the last 6 regular season games. How do I feel about this? Well, coming out of retirement just usually doesn't seem to work out that well. However, Sterling is a legend, and he's 86 years old, and if this is what he wants to do, I'm not going to be the one to talk smack about him. Welcome back, John. Let's hop outside the New York baseball bubble. And we are heading to the West Coast this week. We probably don't give the West Coast enough love, so we're just going to hop around and talk about a couple of teams out there, and I want to start with the Dodgers and their pitching. Oh boy, the Dodgers have had some woes with their pitching this season. There's one particular pitcher who is of interest to Mets fans because he was a bit of a tease to Mets fans last offseason when he was a free agent, even going so far as to have dinner with Steve Cohen at his house. And then he signed with the Dodgers, and that is Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He had a great start to the season. He went 6-2 with a 2.92 ERA over 14 outings, but then he was injured with a strained rotator cuff. I heard he might start against the Cubs tonight, but I checked and it's not yet official, so we'll just have to hang in there on that. The other major starting pitching concern for the Dodgers is Tyler Glasnow. He's been out with elbow tendonitis since mid-August, and the team hopes he returns before the end of the regular season. Now, remember, the Dodgers had already lost a host of starters, including Tony Gonsolin. They had lost Clayton Kershaw to injury. Then he came back. Then he went back on the IL. They also lost so many guys whose names I don't even know because they were replacing the guys who were hurt. So, Gonsolin, Kershaw, Yamamoto, Glasnow, they've had some issues over there. Whether Yamamoto and Glasnow can pitch effectively upon their return will be key in determining whether the Dodgers can nail down that first or second first or second division winning spot so they can get a bye in the first round and miss that wild card round. Matt Chapman. We're hopping over to the San Francisco Giants. Matt Chapman, San Francisco Giants third baseman and a client of so-called super agent Scott Boras, signed a contract extension with the Giants for 6 years, $151 million. Signing an extension mid-season is unusual for a Scott Boras client, especially when he's having a good year like Chapman is. But I think Chapman had about enough of testing the free agent market last winter when he was one of the Boras four who didn't land a contract until the clock struck midnight. He ultimately landed a deal with the Giants that was less desirable than the one the Blue Jays had offered him before he hit free agency, so Chapman won't have to test the free agent market this year. My guess is that Chapman didn't want to go through that again and also evaluated the extension offer from the Giants with a discerning and independent eye instead of just relying on Boras' input. Again, just my guess. And I hope Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, and Sean Manaea take note. And Scott Boras was probably happy to get a win after Jordan Montgomery's disparaging statements about him a couple weeks ago, which we discussed, I know you were listening, wherein Montgomery, one of the Boras four from last winter, said that Boras, quote, kind of butchered Montgomery's free agent negotiations. Let's finish up on the West Coast with the Oakland A's. As you know, the A's are slated to play in a rather intimate park for a few years while they await their projected new home in Las Vegas. That is Sutter Health Park in Sacramento. And the name alone I find some kind of disturbing because it sounds like you might catch some kind of virus there. But anyway, journalist extraordinaire Susan Slusser of the San Francisco Chronicle, boy, she is always on top of it, noted several issues with Sutter Health Park, including that players' agents were concerned about the artificial turf, the facilities not being up to snuff, and the fact that the clubhouses are in parking lots. Did I read that right? And players will have to walk through the outfield to get to the dugout. This sounds so bad that I'm actually almost intrigued to go. It reminded me a little bit of what they said the Six Stadium was like. That was SICKS for the Seattle Pilots in 1969. Anyway, although I'm intrigued to go, players may not be. The Las Vegas Stadium isn't expected to be ready until the 2028 season. That's a long time in Sacramento, and you have to wonder if that's going to last. On the bright side for the Vegas Stadium, it was reported that a Nevada judge has dismissed a teacher union lawsuit that challenged the A's proposed stadium financing. So the A's are a step closer to Vegas. Let's have a word about Roberto Clemente. This Sunday, September 15th, is Roberto Clemente Day in MLB. Clemente was more than a baseball great. There are the facts and there's the story. So here are the facts. Clemente played for the Pirates for 18 seasons, and he had a lifetime batting average of .317 with 240 home runs. He had 12 Gold Gloves and helped the Pirates win the World Series in 1960 and 1971. Crazy to think that he was on that Bill Mazeroski team. The 1972 NLCS, where the Reds played the Pirates and the Reds won, that was Clemente's last series. He would die on December 31st, 1972, delivering supplies to earthquake victims in Nicaragua. When Nicaragua suffered a massive earthquake in December 1972, Clemente started working to have supplies delivered there. However, he learned that the supplies he was working hard to get delivered were being intercepted by the corrupt government of then-President Somoza. So Clemente said, I'm flying down with the next batch of supplies to make sure they get there because the government won't steal from me. He flew on a cargo plane that turned out to be mechanically flawed, and it crashed after takeoff. His teammate, Manny Sanguillen, instead of attending Clemente's funeral, swam in the rough, shark-infested waters to look for Clemente's remains. None were ever found. Clemente was posthumously elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in March 1973, 3 months after his death, as the baseball writers voted to suspend the traditional waiting period for consideration. When Roberto Clemente died, he had exactly 3,000 hits. He was one of the greats of the game, and he was a humanitarian, and he transcended the game of baseball. His number, 21, should be retired in all of baseball. Let's close it up with what's good to eat while watching the ball game, because that's what we do every single time. This week at our house, it's all about the figs. We have 2 fig trees, and because Mother Nature likes to tweak us, the ripe figs descend upon us like a plague all at once for about a 2-week period. So we have eaten figs right off the tree. We've taken a red wagon around the neighborhood and delivered figs to the neighbors, and we've cooked with figs. In the past week, we have made a fig and caramelized onion tart with rosemary and Stilton that was decadent and delicious. Last night, I made roasted chicken with figs and rosemary where the figs cooked down to this jammy goodness. And if that was wrong, I don't want to be right. In the Fig On Deck circle for the coming week, we have fig tort, baked figs with goat cheese, and tomato, fig, and blue cheese salad. Grab a hunk of crusty bread. I hope you enjoyed this week's show, and I'll see you next week.